The framing effect is a cognitive bias in which people's decisions or conclusions are influenced by how information is presented, how it's framed, rather than by the facts itself. In other words, different phrasing or context for the same piece of information can lead to different interpretations or judgments. A classic illustration of framing is the proverbial question of seeing a glass half full versus a glass half empty. Both descriptions are true and describe the same quantity, but half full frames the situation in a positive light, what is present, whereas half empty frames it in a negative light, what is missing. This simple change in wording can evoke very different emotional responses and evaluations and feelings. In the world of analysis, the framing effect means that the way in which data is described or labeled can shape an analyst's conclusions. For example, if a social media report says that 20% of posts on a certain topic showed negative sentiment, one could frame that as saying 80% of the posts were not negative, they were neutral or positive, or 1 in 5 posts were negative. Each phrasing could subtly influence the perception of how serious the negativity is. An analyst might interpret the situation more favorably with the first frame, because 80% not negative sounds pretty reassuring. Or more alarmingly with the second frame, 1 in 5 posts negatively sounds significant, doesn't it? Essentially, the underlying data hasn't changed, just how we're describing it, the frame. But the conclusions and the emphasis might shift. Let's talk about opinion polls or online polls. Imagine a poll result where 90% of people expressed satisfaction with a new policy. This could be framed positively, an overwhelming 90% are satisfied, or negatively, 10%, a significant minority, are dissatisfied. An analyst writing a report might be unwittingly influenced by how the data was framed in the source that they read or how they chose to frame it for their audience. On social media, activists often use framing deliberately, calling out budget cuts as streamlining versus slashing funds as a means of influencing their audience. For an analyst, the key is to recognize when a particular frame might be swaying your interpretation. The framing effect is a demonstration that presentation shapes perception. Identical information can lead to opposite conclusions, depending on the wording or the context. To avoid being misled by framing, analysts should try and restate information in multiple ways. Ask yourself, what's the equivalent description of these facts from the opposite perspective? Think of the counterpoint. In doing so, you can see through the spin, you can get closer to the objective understanding of the information. Be cautious when reading reports yourself. Identify loaded language and specific angles that may frame the data, and seek raw facts where possible.